Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 15th meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing and advisory committees, meetings and information upon request. To make a request for the city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661 2489 extension 2425. I would like to go to the committee and ask if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see. Are there any consent items wishing to be pulled? Councillor Turner.
If we could, 2.6, Madam Chair.
So we'll be pulling 2.6, and I see no other consent items to be pulled. I would like to ask a question on 2.8. I don't think there's a need to pull it. And with that, we'll put the rest of the items on the floor. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I'll move those other items, and I just wanted to say on 2.9, I'm glad to see Ms. Sloan coming aboard the panel. Looks like an interesting background. Nice to have somebody from a neighboring county involved in our process here.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just a note on the report. It says that those were invited to serve on the panel for a 2-year term commencing January 16th, 2019 and ending December 31st, 2019. Should that go to 2020? I'd imagine that Ms. Sloan is not being appointed for 3 months, but rather a year and 3 months.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is the dates are incorrect. We will correct those dates. Thank you.
Good catch.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure in case our motion required any appointment date and termination. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that. I would like to just make a comment on 2.8. This is the agreement between the city and the owner at 1648 Warbler Woods Walk. I know the agreement is going to allow the City of London to have this area as open space. It's a significant woodlot, that, from what I understand, but I would like to know from staff what the plans, or restoration plans, if you will, for this land that the city will have in its ownership. I just wonder if I could go to staff with that question.
Through the chair, unfortunately, I haven't been able to speak with Mr. McPherson on this, but what I can advise the chair is that we will follow up with Mr. McPherson, and if it's okay, we can get back to you with any information on that to give you a sense of the timing and what projects are contemplated.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Turner.
Sorry, and also in the meantime, if I might, on item 2.1, the 9th report of EPAC, Environmental and Ecological Planning Advisory Committee, I'm glad to see the recommendations and the presentation associated with the environmental management guidelines. That update is important. I think there was a couple really key findings I remember from my days, such as buffers and setbacks in backyards aren't really acceptable or functional, and that needs to be changed. So those are those look like it'll be a good process, and I'm glad EPAC and the community is being engaged through that process.
Thank you. I'm looking to the committee for a seconder as well for the consent items. Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I'd like to go to 2.6. This was pulled by Councillor Turner at 1615 North Rutledge Park. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with respect to this one, I guess I don't really have much intent to change the recommendation, but if I read this right, the application was first filed in 1978. This is 40 years ago. And this then becomes subject to extensions of draft plan approval for 40 years. I remember last term we had the discussion about extensions, and we started to look a little closer at current context and making sure that those were reflected, and so the red line amendments then started coming forward to be able to reflect current planning context. At some point, though, I would imagine that a draft plan just becomes completely stale dated and becomes really challenging to continue to extend. At what point do we start to consider perhaps not extending it and saying it's been so
asking, that's something we've identified we actually need to articulate a policy on. The city currently doesn't have something that's quite robust on that. Generally, though, what we're doing is we're looking at applications as these requests come in and to make sure they do meet current municipal policies and standards and guidelines as well. If there is a discrepancy and that can't be resolved, then of course we'd be recommending, or the approval authority would be recommending refusal, or would be looking to refuse the application, the draft plan request. This is an employment lands subdivision, so it's a little bit different than a residential, and so we'll sort of look at that as well. But right now we are quite comfortable that this can proceed with another draft plan extension at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Yeoman. I appreciate that. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd imagine that this requires a fair amount of administrative review, though, every 3 years, and the opportunity cost associated with keeping these drafts on file and having to pull them back, review them, ensure they're in context, compare them against the OPS and or the PPS and the OP and the zoning and all of the stuff that goes with that. It's not a short job to prepare a report, bring it back to us, and do this every 3 years. Is there any worthwhile consideration in setting I mean, we do have 3 years, I guess, but an overall limit to the amount of time that these can be carried?
Through you, Madam Chair, so the councillor is very correct. There is quite a lot of review that does go into this, and it's a lot more than the $1,000 fee actually that we charge for draft plan extensions. So that's something we're going to be looking at as part of that review. To actually limit the number of years for a draft plan extension, that would require something to be enshrined in an official plan policy. We'd have to look at that in greater detail. At this point, we're looking at what we can do administratively to provide some guidance, but we can take that feedback back and look at it. It'd be a bit more enhanced from there.
So I guess that really comes down to us at some point too, is to say, well, this isn't really acceptable. It's gone on too long. I'd imagine that if staff were to have seen something problematic and concern, it wouldn't be recommended for an extension. It would be recommended to be refused, and then at this point, our committee would say refused, quite possibly.
Through you, Madam Chair, since it's delegated authority, what we would be doing per the delegation bylaws indicating the approval authority's intention to withdraw draft plan approval and seek council's endorsement of that. So that's why you can see the recommendation framed the way it is. So right now we're seeking council's feedback on the requested extension of draft plan approval.
Thank you. I appreciate the point out on that. Our feedback might be, these go on a long time. So if there's a way that we can do that in such a way that either the administrative fees associated with the work associated with it are reflective, or that there's some mechanism by which we've evaluated everything to
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And with that, we move on to our scheduled items. 3.1 is a delegation. Amber Cantel, if she is here, welcome. And we do have a delegation from the Trees and Forests Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much.
Yes, welcome. Ms. Cantel, just to remind you, the time is 5 minutes as well for the delegation.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. So on behalf of the new Trees and Forests Advisory Committee, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to come speak. As a group of citizens with an interest in London's trees and forests, we're very grateful for the chance to comment on the tree protection bylaw. So just some key comments from our last meeting. We wanted to note that the current bylaw as it stands only really protects tree species that grow to be large, so things like willows or cottonwoods. This actually reduces the number of species that can be potentially protected by the tree bylaw because not all kinds of trees can get to be 50 centimeters, which is the current threshold. Effectively, this means that the next generation of forest is not protected under the current bylaw. And I think members of our committee were raising the question, is it right that a tree doesn't receive protection in London until it's 60 or 70 years old? Is that a good way to set ourselves up for tree protection? It's important to us that the concern for these trees, the younger trees in the next generation, does not get lost in the dry trees in London for obvious reasons. The report noted from staff noted that going from 50 centimeters to 20 or 25 centimeters would probably equate to a 4-load increase in workload, which we imagine could be quite a shock to the system for forestry. So we would suggest that the city might want to consider an incremental increase, going to maybe 40 centimeters rather than jumping all the way down to 2025. But in any case, whatever threshold the city chooses, it's important that those increases be met with additional staff resources, so staff are not pulled from the other important work urban forestry does solely to focus on bylaw enforcement. Unless it can be said definitively that tree protection bylaws are the single most cost-effective way to protect trees, it's important that those other programs and aspects of urban forestry persist. A couple of other things we wanted to comment on. We think it's important that the bylaw defines what constitutes a hazardous tree and that photos begin to be included as part of what's required in the permit application. Pretty much everything you're going to use to justify cutting down a tree is visual. Arborists and foresters don't use their sense of smell very much. So it seemed like photos would be an intuitive thing to include. At the organization I work at, Reforest London, we get several calls a year from residents who will say, oh, they cut down this tree, it was totally healthy, but I can't prove it now because the tree is gone. So photos would obviously be very helpful for accountability. And similarity, we think there should be a checklist of what constitutes best practice or poor forestry practice in other cases to justify the removal. Right now in the bylaw, it just says, the forester has to say, yes, it's good forestry practice. And again, that doesn't really allow for good accountability. So those were suggestions on those parts. And last but not least, comment on the question in the staff report around golf courses and cemeteries. So it was raised that perhaps golf courses and cemeteries should be exempt from the bylaw. Currently, businesses that trade in trees, so orchards, tree farms, things like that, are exempt for obvious reasons. The question for golf courses and cemeteries was made on two bases. One was, it is unfair competition. If the city operates a golf course and they don't have to follow the bylaw and the private golf course does, Is that unfair competition? And also an argument that, golf courses and cemeteries inherently value trees as a part of their business. So our comments back on that are, if an organization or a landowner is exempt from the tree bylaw, they aren't required to do tree replacements, which we think is an important requirement. And saying that one kind of landowner values trees more than others is a slippery slope to be on. There are many landowners you get more foot traffic in a shopping area if it has trees. So we saw that as a slippery slope argument. What we would rather see is that rather than providing an exemption, the city simply hold itself to the same standards as private landowners on its properties. And those were all our comments, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Squire.
Oh,
So I just want to ask a couple of things. One of the things it says in your report and through the chair is it says there's consensus across the community that size threshold needs to be lower. So what I'm interested in is how did you make a determination that the community wants the threshold lower? Because I have to tell you as a councillor, I usually hear from people who are very unhappy with the tree protection bylaw because they're trying to remove a tree and they find out there's a lot of costs in doing it. So did you do a poll or how did you determine that?
So obviously as an advisory committee, we don't have the resources really to do polls or things along those lines. I think it was based on two things, and I would defer to my other committee members if they are present, but one is simply from our own discussions in the community. So our organization, Reforest London, we talk to a lot of residents who are very strongly in favor of protecting more trees. So it's something we do hear often. That's not necessarily, statistically defensible, but it's something we do hear very frequently. And also I think the initial, if I recall, there was a poll that was actually done by the city in preparation for the urban forest strategy and the tree protection bylaw that very much said Londoners were keen to see trees protected and more trees protected. So I think that's what we've heard. I would defer to staff if they have other comments on that regard.
Councillor Squire.
So my second question is about the education program idea that you said an education program may be less expensive than enforcing the bylaw. For example, planting a replacement tree before the original tree is removed. I wonder how far that discussion went, or if you have further thoughts on that, because that's an idea that I think makes some degree of sense for people who, for legitimate reasons or whatever you want to call them, want to remove a tree.
Yeah, so TFAC has definitely flagged wanting to explore education programs as something we want to see as part of our work plan this year. When the tree protection bylaw was initially being proposed, there were members of the committee that had flagged a lack of baseline data to define how cost-effective a tree protection bylaw is. And that's something that's still very challenging for us in that it's hard to judge, is it better to spend more time on enforcement or is it better to spend more time on education? And I think there's a lot of decisions made around urban forestry where having an understanding of those numbers and what programs are most effective would be really valuable. I don't think it's data we have available now. And when we were doing the initial discussion around that topic about cost effectiveness, we couldn't find any other communities that had that kind of data that had set out to gather baseline data before enacting a bylaw. So I think education is very valuable. What the trade-offs are, I couldn't say.
And I just want to thank you for recognizing that there's a balancing between enforcing a bylaw and the resources that are needed to enforce that bylaw. I don't often hear that from many people in this room, so it's really nice to hear it, that when you're saying, hey, we want to enforce, we want a bylaw, we want to enforce something, but we recognize that to do that, there's going to be resources and you have to balance that. So I really like the way you've also addressed education, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for that. And actually, if I can make one follow-up comment on that, when we were having the discussion around small trees in particular, I think it's worth flagging that London is outstanding, I think personally, in terms of the initiatives it has going on right now to encourage tree planting on private land, primarily through the Tree Me program. And it would be interesting to have a better sense of the impact of that, because I think, tree planting is an important part of a strategy when you're talking specifically about the younger generation and getting new trees started. And it's nice that I think London really has tried to balance that. So that's something else we'd flag. Thanks.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. So about 3 years ago, we went through the process of evaluating and establishing the tree protection bylaw. I mean, I'd imagine well, I know you're quite aware of all the programs that we have in place, including TreeMe, but also the public lands tree protection bylaw, as well as the significant woodlands criteria, the tree protection areas, and all of those things. And I think when we're looking at the bylaw and making sure that it's implementable at a resource level, we had the recommendation when it came forward to us was for 75 centimeter diameter. TFAC and Reforest London both made the position and arguments to reduce that size. When we looked at the tree diameter that were affected in the various bylaws in terms of distinctive trees, Toronto was kind of the outlier in terms of the lowest diameter of the trees. Others had discussions about 15 centimeter trees and so on, but really in terms of distinctive trees, Toronto and Ottawa were the ones that were seen as having those diameter thresholds that were very specific. Ottawa had 50 centimeters, and so when we took a look at it, we benchmarked against the Ottawa, made the recommendation that 50 centimeters be the one that we adopt and use, and that's what passed. But even since then, we've heard that in terms of resourcing to be able to respond to that 50 centimeter standard, it's significantly difficult for staff to do so. So I have apprehensions that going further at this point, I think you recognize that too in your report, that that would be really challenging to get there, and a fourfold increase on top of, we were already told, I think it was a close to 2 to 3-fold increase to go from 75 to 50, that we might go a little bit further in that. Totally recognize the point about generational trees and that intergenerational component about how to preserve and protect those. I think a lot of that helps to be addressed through tree protection areas, through significant woodland guidelines. Those, in terms of the cluster of trees, the independent and individual trees themselves are a little more challenging to do those protections on at the smaller diameter. I guess that's more commentary than anything, but I was wondering how that process kind of played out in TFAC, given that TFAC had given previous recommendations on this bylaw, and this pushes it a bit further than what TFAC had recommended at the time.
I think I would just say to that most of the members of the current TFAC are new to TFAC. So for a lot of them, it was a chance to comment for the first time on the bylaw. And anytime you change up the mix of people, you'll have a slightly different perspective. Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to our guest. Again, I think there were some excellent recommendations there. You're bringing up some important points and some of the dilemmas that we face in here. One of them, of course, there's a problem with reducing the diameter, is because that tells you how soon you need to cut down a tree in order to avoid to have the city interfering with your use of the property. So if I think, hey, I may want to have a swimming pool here, I better cut this tree down so that somebody doesn't come in and tell me I can't cut that down. I really like the idea of education. Really, that's the direction to go, because it sets the context. If everybody cares about and likes trees as much as those of us who sit around the horseshoe, then we know they're gonna plant the trees that they want and love, and will keep them longer. So I think it's better if we go in that direction rather than forcing people to do certain things. I know I had someone come and try to appeal one of the decisions unsuccessfully, which is too bad. A squirrel had planted not a very pretty tree, I don't know if it was a nuisance tree, on a fence line. They wanted to cut this down, both neighbors did, so that they could plant some fruit trees and have some sun for a garden. We told them they couldn't do that. Even when they offered to plant more trees, which is what the city does, your suggestion of having the city obey its own bylaws also maybe a challenging one, because I've seen where we have simply not come anywhere near that. We put in a drain on Oxford Street and cut down huge swaths of trees, basically saying, well, we'll plant more small ones, but.
Councillor Van Hol, sorry to interrupt, but is there a question here? I'm just trying to help you along. If there is a question, or are you just commenting?
I think that's probably more commentary, but I do like the idea that we're looking at education. I do like the idea that we're trying to balance whether or not this is the best way to go, a tree protection bylaw. I question that, and for a number of reasons, some of the points that I brought up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? I see none. I just want to thank you very much for the presentation and the work and the effort that the advisory group has put into this as well. Thank you. So moving on to our, nope. Need a mover and a seconder, Councillor Turner, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Helmer. Councillor Turner?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to our first public participation meeting. This is a application for a zoning bylaw amendment.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And if the committee will allow me, I'd like to go to the public to see if there's anyone here that would like to speak to this application. If you could just raise your hand and acknowledge that. I see no one here from the public, and I'd like to go to the committee if they would like to hear a presentation from staff on this application. I see everyone's fine with that. I'd like to go to the applicant now then, if the applicant is here. If you could please come to the microphone, saying your name, address, and you do have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members and staff. I'm Lindsay Clark with Sifton Properties Limited. I just would like to thank staff for bringing this report forward to Planning Committee, and we are in agreement with the recommendations. I am available for any questions that committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I see no one else that would like to make a comment. I would like a motion to close the public participation meeting. Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So I would like to go to the committee. This is a zoning bylaw amendment to comments from the committee. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I'll move the recommendation. I think the special provisions are quite reasonable.
And I am looking for a seconder, Councillor Cassidy. And with that, we can vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to our next public participation meeting. This is regarding the Glen Cairn Community Resource Center and the Corporation of the City of London regarding 220 and 244 Adelaide Street South. I'm looking to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And just before I proceed, I would like to ask if there's anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this application. There is, thank you. And committee, I would like to ask if you would like to hear staff's presentation. Okay, and welcome, Ms. Lowry, and we're looking forward to your presentation. You do have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are two applications pertaining to two neighboring properties on Adelaide Street South. The first application is Z-9061, which is a zoning bylaw amendment application advanced by the Glen Cairn Community Resource Center pertaining to their property at 244 Adelaide Street South. The other is a city-initiated official plan amendment to the London Plan pertaining to both 244 Adelaide Street South and the property to the north, which is addressed as 220 Adelaide Street South. So the subject properties are located in the Glen Cairn Planning District on the east side of Adelaide Street South. 220 Adelaide Street South has a frontage of approximately 35.5 meters and an area of approximately 3,360 square meters. The site is currently developed as a commercial recreation establishment and as a bakery. 244 Adelaide Street to the south has a frontage of approximately 41 meters and an area of approximately 3,642 square meters. It's currently developed as a community center known as the Glen Cairn Community Resource Center. Both properties front on and have access off of Adelaide, and surrounding land uses include a furniture store to the north, low-rise residential to the east, Youth for Christ Youth Center to the south, and an automobile sales establishment and the Lenin Ukrainian Center across Adelaide to the west. So the requested amendments are twofold. So the first being the rezoning sought by the Glen Cairn Community Resource Center, which is to facilitate a conversion of underutilized space on the second story of their existing building to a nonprofit dental clinic, which would be operated by the London Community Dental Alliance. A special provision is also requested to permit a reduced parking supply of 33 spaces, whereas 40 spaces are required. And the existing special provisions permitting front and interior side yard setbacks of 1.2 meters are also proposed to continue to apply to the site. As for the city-initiated London Plan amendment, so in March of 2018, Council approved a rezoning for 220 Adelaide Street South to permit the now existing commercial recreation establishment. Through that same resolution, Council directed staff to initiate a London Plan amendment to redesignate 220 as well as 244 Adelaide Street South from the light industrial place type to the commercial industrial place type. And upon receipt of the application of the Glen Cairn Community Resource Center, staff initiated that official plan amendment. So in terms of policy, 220 Adelaide Street South is currently designated light industrial in the 1989 official plan, while 244 Adelaide Street South is designated community facility. Both properties are currently designated commercial and industrial uses. The commercial industrial place type contemplates a range of employment uses, as well as the commercial recreation and place of assembly uses that currently occupy both sites. Now you can see on the image on the right-hand side of the screen, the dark gray is the current light industrial designation, or place type rather, while the purple is the commercial industrial place type. So the recommended amendment would result in a contiguous extension of that commercial industrial place type, which would have the effect of squaring off the designation along this portion of Adelaide, where the commercial industrial place type lands are situated currently. As for the proposed medical dental clinic, so the Glencairn Community Resource Center has existed on the subject site since 2012 and has demonstrated a level of compatibility with the uses in the surrounding area. The community center is interpreted to be a place of assembly and is a permitted use in the commercial industrial place type of the London Plan. As well, health clinics and community centers are also permitted in the community facility designation of the 1989 official plan. And the recommended zoning bylaw amendment serves to facilitate an expansion to the services and programming of the existing community center by providing nonprofit dental services in association with the community center. So in conclusion, the recommended zoning bylaw amendment is in conformity with the London Plan as well as the 1989 official plan. Lastly, based on the proposed gross floor area for the community center use as well as the medical dental clinic use, a total of 40 parking spaces would be required, whereas 33 currently exist on site. The site is located in the primary transit area and is serviced by existing London Transit bus routes with stops nearby, and staff had no concerns with the reduction of 7 spaces. Of the 1989 official plan and the London Plan. As such, it's recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment and the London Plan amendment be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now go to the Councillor Turner, technical questions. Thank you.
Really quick and weird technical question. I'd imagine there's no contemplation for extension of Baseline Road into the other Baseline Road. Just looking on the map, I hadn't realized that Baseline actually extends on the other side there. Sometimes when we see those two, there's some plan in the works that at some point those would be connected, but I'd imagine that was probably connected at one point and then deleted rather, going the other way.
Madam Chair, Baseline Road is a funny one in that there's a couple sections that don't line up and yet they're still called Baseline Road, but there's never been any intention to connect it at this location.
Thanks. I only asked because we've had an application in the past where there was some takings associated with that too. So, okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you for that question. I always think of Baseline Road being in the west part of the city as well, so that just really confuses me. So any further technical questions? I see none. I would like to go now to the public. If you could come forward, stating your name and address if you wish, and you do have 5 minutes.
And
there is
I'm with the wrong microphone here, okay. I want you to know, after all the publicity today about our young tennis star from Canada, that I'm a tennis buff as well. And so I did my deep breathing this morning and visualization as well as my mindful meditation. So I hope that I have the same results as he has as well. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, because what we have, we're very much in support of the Planning Committee's recommendation. And we just thought I'd like to tell you a little bit about the project that has resulted in the request for this rezoning. I have been connected with the University of Western Ontario Dental School for 50 years now. And over the last 15 years or so, I've been involved in dental outreach programs and established one at the university called DOCS. And that is where we went out into the community and treated patients who didn't have any means of dental care. We did this through different social agencies. It was an evening program that involved going out between 10 and 15 times a year. And we were able to involve the dental students as well. But what this provided us with was a real window into the terrific need for dental care for those people who can't afford dentistry in London. And we've had a business case report done for our project. which has really indicated that there's 70,000 people in the London area there that are at the poverty line or below. And these people are the ones that we want to be able to access and help. The way we have done that is to try to form an alliance which is consisted of some very significant individuals or organizations. We have the University of Western Ontario's Medical School, we have Fanshawe's Community College Oral Health Department, we've got the London Intercommunity Health Centre, the London Middlesex Health Centre, the London and District Dental Society, and several agencies all are coming together and formed an alliance. Our alliance is now organized and incorporated as a not-for-profit, and our sole purpose is basically to establish a clinic to help support these people in dental need. The location, as you now know, is the Glencairn Community Centre, which is on a main access route of London. Majority of these people are below the poverty line. Many of them don't have cars. And so we appreciate the reduction of 40 to 33 as far as parking spaces are needed. And I can assure you from personal experience, having 2 different offices over my 50 years, that that should be certainly sufficient to handle our needs there. The support that we have had has been fantastic. Foundations have supported us for in raising money for capital expenses. The London Community Foundation, City of London itself in helping us to provide funds for renovations. And then there's many other social groups that are coming behind us. The means of doing this is by establishing the clinic and having our alliance actually operate the clinic itself. So the operation will be one in which we're going 5 days a week. And we plan to hire both permanent staff, which will be a full-time dentist, hygienist, receptionist, and navigator. Plus, we've already had people phone and want to volunteer. These are professional dentists, hygienists, and auxiliaries. So everything is coming together. We've had wonderful support from the Free Press, if you had a chance to look at the Free Press today. And it's recognized throughout the city that there's
Just to
a
let
need
you
there.
know,
We
you've got
now
a
have
minute
the functions, and we are very much in support of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions? Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As our friend was speaking there, he'd mentioned collaboration with the Middlesex London Health Unit. I wasn't aware that this was a collaborative. It's in another division within my employer, but I'll declare the pecuniary interest at this point just to be cautious.
So noted. Any technical questions? Anyone? Sorry. I'll just go to, I see no technical questions, so if there's anyone else that would like to speak to this application, please come forward. I see no one else. I'm looking, if you would like to come to the microphone, yes. And please state your name and address if you wish.
Hi there, my name's Nick Laverne. I live at 120 Gladstone Avenue in the area. I personally think this would be a good idea because there's a lot of people in the community that would benefit from such thing as this. And I don't think that the redacted number of parking spaces will matter because most people would come on foot there. Okay.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to speak to this application? I see none, so I'm looking for a motion to close. The PPM, Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Squire.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
And we have one abstaining as well. And we have not approved the recommendation yet. We still have to go through the process of questions, comments, and debate, which is very important to this process. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to see this come through, and I just want to thank Dr. White for showing such leadership on this. I sit on the Board of Health, and we talk about this need in the community. It's been around for a long time, and just in the past, I believe the approach has always been, from the health unit's perspective anyway, going out individually to different dentists and to try to get different dentists throughout the community to see these patients that don't have the resources and don't have a dentist of their own and don't have dental coverage or insurance that many people have. So there is a really big need for this in London and Middlesex, and it's so important, and it's so wonderful to see the community come together along with Western and Fanshawe and Intercommunity Health, and then all the individuals that are volunteering their time and their expertise and their knowledge and their care and compassion. I'm really happy to support this. I can't say that enough. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments from the committee before I go to Councillor Van Holst? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Committee. I do hope and expect that you will support this because of Councillor Cassidy's remarks. But it's a very needed project. I want to thank, again, Dr. Wright for spearheading this. It's also very appropriately located. So I think that the people in the area will be able to make a great deal of use of this low-income dental clinic. And I think it's the kind of thing we need to see more of. It's unfortunate it's taken so long to happen, but I'm glad it's here. Maybe in the future we can find ways to expedite projects like this through the zoning process.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Cassidy?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just want to add another quick note. I did read in the Free Press article this morning that there are hopes and plans to have other facilities, other locations for this throughout the city. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these come back to the planning department to see the planning committee to see future applications to make sure that the whole city is covered. Thanks.
And with that, I'm looking for a motion to recommend and a seconder as well. Deputy Mayor Helmer. And I too am pleased to support this recommendation as well.
Closing the vote, the motion passes 4 with 1 abstained.
Moving on to our next public participation meeting, it's 3.4. It is 324 York Street. Sorry, hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. So it is 3.4. 324 York Street. Councillor Cassidy, opening the public participation meeting, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
And I'd like to just ask the public if there's anyone here that would like to speak this application. There is. Thank you very much. And I'd like to go to the committee. I would assume that we would like a presentation and from staff. And before I go to staff, I would like to go to Mr. Tomasinik.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just want to introduce the committee to Melanie Vivian. This is her first Planning Committee meeting. She is a recent grad from the University of Waterloo, and up until now, her focus has been more on minor variances and consent applications, but she's been assigned more zoning applications, so you'll be seeing more Melanie here. Melanie is also local, and so we were very lucky to be able to attract her back to London, and I'd like to, again, just introduce her to the committee.
Welcome, Ms. Vivian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Tomasinik. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment application pertaining to the property municipally addressed as 324 York Street. So the site is located towards the southeast end of downtown with access and frontage off both York Street and Waterloo Street. It's irregular in shape and is just under 1,500 square meters in area and is currently operating as a surface commercial parking lot. The site is surrounded by surface commercial parking lots to the north, the London Convention Centre to the west, an automobile sales and service establishment to the southeast, and the London Middlesex EMS headquarters to the east across Waterloo Street. So in 2002, Council passed a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a surface commercial parking lot for a temporary period not exceeding 3 years. Since then, periodic extensions to the temporary zone have allowed the use to continue over the years. Most recent was in November 2018, where a short-term 6-month extension was approved to allow existing users of the surface commercial parking lot to make alternative parking arrangements and to encourage the long-term redevelopment of the site. So the requested amendment is to extend the temporary use zone to allow the site to function as a surface commercial parking lot for an additional period of 3 years. So just some policy background. The site is located within the downtown area designation of the 1989 official plan, as well as a downtown place type in the London plan. The existing zoning is a holding downtown area special provision zone with special provisions as well as permissions for height and density, and the T71 zone, which permitted a surface commercial parking lot for 6 months and has since expired in May 2019. So the policies within the 1989 official plan and the London plan discourage the extension of the temporary zones for commercial parking lot uses. So the first issue was the use itself. In terms of the use, the London plan discourages the extension of temporary zones permitting surface commercial parking lots that have been in existence for an extended period of time. They're discouraged where an adequate supply of parking exists in the vicinity of the subject lot. Additionally, our Move Forward London's downtown plan and the downtown parking strategy identify the site as underutilized with a low utilization rate of 57%. Further, the 1989 official plan and the London plan provide evaluation criteria for applications to extend the temporary zoning for surface commercial parking lots, which discourage the extension of temporary zones for those lots. And the extension of the temporary zone that was previously approved was for the purpose of allowing users to find alternative parking arrangements. That was previously granted as a gradual phased approach to discontinue the temporary use of the property as a surface commercial parking lot. So as such, staff is recommending that the requested amendment to extend the temporary zone of 3 years be refused. The use of the surface commercial parking lot is inconsistent with the provincial policy statement, the general intent of the 1989 official plan and the London plan policies. The site is located in an area where parking utilization is low and therefore encouraged by policy to transition away from parking towards a long-term use permitted by the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions? I see none. I'd like to go to the applicant, if the applicant's here. Please come forward, sir, stating your name and address, if you wish.
My name's Pat Clancy. I'm here from Mackenzie Lake Lawyers here on behalf of the applicant. Just wanted to say a few points about this particular property. Just in reviewing the staff report, one of the main reasons the staff recommended against granting the extension to the property, identifying it as some prime real estate for redevelopment. However, our client, the applicant, is a developer himself. Well, it's a corporation. However, they are in the business of development, and to this point, the market has not dictated redevelopment of that property. A couple of other things I'd like to point out. The low utilization rate, or identifying this property being in a low utilization zone. That same downtown parking lot study, that low utilization zone is actually weekday utilization. On the weekends, the same property is actually the highest utilization rate of the 6 quadrants in that particular study at 73%. That's almost 2.5 times as much as any other area. So on the weekends, that particular area is a high utilization zone. And one other point, there's also a temporary surface area parking lot abutting that property that's owned by the city. It does not appear to be getting the same scrutiny, and it doesn't appear to be the same impetus to similarly shut down that parking lot. One last thing I'd like to point out, just across from there, 369 York Street, the old London Free Press building is now Venture London, or will be very soon. And we believe that it'll generate new demand for parking in that area, which will obviously create a need for parking and for the need for that parking lot in that particular area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions? I see none. I would like to go to the public now. If you'd like to come forward to the microphone and speak to this application, please do so. There's 2 microphones, and come to the microphone saying your name and address if you wish. And I'll ask one more time. Please come forward if you'd like to speak to the application. And I will go to the committee and ask to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
I'd like to go to the committee. Any questions, comments? Councillor Turner.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just thought of a question for the applicant, if I might, through you, or for the representative of the applicant. The 6-month extension was granted to allow notification to clients of the surface parking lot that it would, to be able to wind down operations. Has any notification been given to those clients?
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm unaware.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Through you, Madam Chair, to staff. So the 6 months was supposed to have expired May 31st, is that correct?
It was around that time. I could get the exact date, but it was the end of May. Yes, that's right.
So through you, Madam Chair, it's been operating outside of the required permissions for 3 months then?
Madam Chair, that's not uncommon. Oftentimes, applicants apply prior to the expiration of the zone, and then we process the application in that time between expiration and planning committee.
Through you, Madam Chair. Okay, my only comment there is that we made our preference very clear at the last time this came to this committee, and it went through full council as well. So there had been rolling 3-year exemptions, almost like a rubber stamp in the previous years, but I believe the applicant was very much aware of what our intention was.
Any other comments from the committee? Councillor Turner.
I guess just to summarize, I'll support the staff recommendation of refusal. This has come before us a couple times now, once for the extension and previous to that, the 3-year extension. During the situation of renewals that were being requested around this area and others, became the impetus for the downtown parking study and an investigation as to utilization rates and to where surface parking would be recommended for approval and where it would not. And this is clearly within that policy area of the will not. We tried to provide also the history of this applicant. In the original, there was a site plan requirement, and that site plan requirement was not fulfilled for multiple sessions in the renewals for a long time. It wasn't until it was indicated that this might not be renewed that any site plan activity in conformance with what that order was actually undertaken. But that said, at that point, Council made clear that the 6-month extension was to allow for wind down of operations. We're unaware of whether that activity did take place, but I think ample notice and potential for this day to arrive has been 3.5 years in the making. So this shouldn't come as much surprise. So I will support the staff recommendation, and I will move the staff recommendation.
And before Councillor Cassidy is motioning to second the recommendation, I will go to Mayor Holder. Welcome.
Thanks. Actually, I've had my question answered through some of the commentary through Councillor Turner, so I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I would, we're ready to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, committee. Moving along then to 3.5. This is a public participation meeting for 551 Knights Hill Road. I'm looking to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Mayor Holder. And before we move on, I would like to go to the gallery and ask if there's anyone here from the public that would like to speak to this application. I see none. I'd like to go to the committee if the committee would like to hear a presentation from staff. It looks like the committee is fine without a presentation. I would like to go to the applicant. The applicant is here. Welcome. Please state your name and address.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Matt Campbell.
And you have 5 minutes.
I think I will need 5 minutes. I'm sick as well, so no, I'll take just a little bit of time. We're definitely in support of the staff recommendation for approval for the rezoning of this property. This is an instance in which the property owner has a pharmacy that they thought was accessory to a medical dental use. Evidently, it is not. So this is just bringing the property into compliance with the bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have at this time.
Thank you. Any questions? Technical questions? I see none. And I would like to go to the committee to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
I'd like to go to the committee and this is regarding the rezoning application to add the additional uses of the pharmacy and professional office, bringing it into conformity. I'm looking for a motion from Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Mayor Holder.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Well, we are on time and moving to 3.5 to the next public participation meeting regarding 3493 Colonel Talbot Road. I'm looking to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Squire.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And I'd just like to go to the gallery if there's anyone from the public. There is someone here from the public that would like to speak. And I'd like to ask the committee if they would like a presentation from staff on this application. Yes, it looks like we're going to have a presentation. And welcome, Ms. Wise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is application OZ 9049, an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application for 3493 Colonel Talbot Road. The subject site is located at the northeast corner of Pack Road and Colonel Talbot Road. It's also within the Silverleaf subdivision, which coincidentally also came tonight for a request for extension. The requested amendment is to allow for a new gas bar, car wash, and a takeout restaurant with a drive-through. There's also a request to retain the existing convenience commercial uses, which the site is currently zoned for. This is a conceptual elevation of the convenience store and the takeout restaurant. The front elevation of the gas bar and the north elevation of the car wash, noting that the car wash is not to scale. Looking to our policy context, the site is within the North Lambeth neighborhood in the Southwest Area Secondary Plan. The site is within the low and medium density residential designations, which primarily permits a range of low to medium scale residential uses. A limited range of convenience and personal service commercial uses are also permitted. In the 1989 plan, new convenience commercial and service station uses are contemplated as permitted uses in the low and medium density residential designations through an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, where they function to serve the surrounding residential area and traveling public, where they are located on arterial roads or primary collector and arterial roads. And the range of uses include a broad range of convenience commercial uses, restaurants, financial institutions, service stations, gas bars, and car washes. Looking to the London plan, the site is within the neighborhood's place type and located at the corner of two civic boulevards. Neighborhoods are intended to be vibrant, exciting places to live, which will be delivered through easy access to daily goods and services within walking distance. Mixed-use commercial and service uses will be permitted at appropriate locations, such as this at the intersection of two major streets, where the range of permitted uses is broader and the intensity of development may increase. We have received 4 submissions from the public, and as a brief summary, we've received concerns for no need for a gas bar in this location, that there's already enough gas stations in the area, that it doesn't fit with a residential character and should be located within a commercial area. There's concern for negative impact on traffic flow, traffic volume, noise, and collisions. Negative impact on property values. There's also concern for environmental impacts of buried and leaky gas tanks and or soil contamination, and as well negative impacts on the pathway ambience. So the public comments we've received have been considered, addressed, or incorporated where possible into the development design and the associated bylaw. In staff's opinion, the requested amendment is consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement and is in conformity with the enforced policies of the London Plan, the 1989 official plan, and the Southwest Area Secondary Plan. The zoning proposed is to add the service station 2 special provision zone to allow for the service station, gas bar, and car wash, and to include setbacks for the car wash from the open space and residentially zoned lands. To also amend the convenience commercial 6 special provision zone to allow for the restaurant takeout and the associated drive-through facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions? Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Wise. I guess my comments when I take a look at it, the drive-through for the restaurant seems appropriately located. The queuing lanes don't seem to create the potential for spill out into the roads. The car wash, however, is incredibly close to a proposed townhome. I recognize there's a lot of discussion about the sound mitigation efforts. One of them includes a 14-foot wall. That's really tall. And car washes are really loud. Is that going to be sufficient and adequate? I see that it claims to be, but I have a bit of skepticism about that.
Ms. Wise?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, that's a concern that we also share. So there are special provisions that are proposed in the bylaw to ensure that what was requested was 5 meters. What we are recommending is a 15-meter setback. So the further off the boundary that car wash is, the less intensive noise mitigation would be required. So we have addressed that through the bylaw provisions.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd imagine that you'd worked with the applicant to look for alternate siting of that car wash, perhaps like along the Colonel Talbot Road access or the Pack Road access. This drive-through speaker versus the air dryer blowers with the car wash, magnitudes of scale and volume difference. Were there any options that could have been achieved that might have been more optimal?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is an option that we discussed just briefly with the applicant recently. There was also a maximum noise wall permission attached to this site, so nothing more than 2.4 meters, which is what the bylaw already contemplates. Relocating the car wash and also the orientation of the car wash to Colonel Talbot was also our preferred option, and that would help eliminate some of the noise concerns on the adjacent future residential.
So at this time, we're looking at zoning, but that would be something addressed through site plan, is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other technical questions from the committee? I see none. If the committee will allow me, I just would like to follow up with a technical question on the car wash. And as we know, car wash facilities use a lot of water, and just wondering where the water drainage and how that's going to work in the car wash, given that the Mathers stream is there and the sensitivity in the area. Just is that addressed through site plan, or? do we know what's happening with the water?
To you, Madam Chair, the water is addressed in a number of ways on site through stormwater management. So firstly, on site in the parking lot is controlled through typical stormwater management treatment on site, and then to the municipal outlet. Internal to the car wash, it does get managed as well through the building permit compliance process, where there is control measures to ensure that it's safely conveyed to the storm system. And I believe it actually at that point goes to the sanitary system, not the storm system.
Okay, thank you. And no further technical questions of staff. I would like to go to the applicant, if the applicant is here to make a comment. Welcome, Mr. Soufan. If you could state your name.
I think, is this on? Oh, hi. Good evening. My name is Ali Soufan. I'm from York Developments. Our planner, Laverne Kirkness, decided to take a last-minute vacation with his entire family to Norway, so I'm going to step in for him here today for a moment. We agree with the staff recommendation. We've been working tirelessly over the last week since our meeting with staff to reorient the car wash so we keep it at least 15 meters away from the west boundary or the south boundary, so we can limit the size of the noise wall to 2.4 meters, I think it is in the bylaw, in the standard bylaw. So definitely, and then flipping the car wash so it's the ingress would be off Pack Road, and the egress would be off Colonel Talbot Road, so the dryers are closer to Colonel Talbot, and we hope to reorient the building. I've got Steve Etier from Suncor Petro-Canada corporate here, so I think we both agree on that technical amendment here. I think we all want to get to the same spot, so it meshes from a traffic and noise perspective as close to Colonel Talbot as we can, because we have future phases of development sort of surrounding this parcel as well. So I'd like to take any further questions that anybody may have, or from the public as well. Thank you.
Any technical questions from the applicant? I see none, and I would like to go to the public. If there's anyone here, please come forward, sir, stating your name, address if you wish, and you do have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name's Glenn Dietz. I live at 3559 Loyalist Court, and that's diagonally opposite the proposed development. So I'm right on the corner of Colonel Talbot Road and Pack Road as well. So my wife Carol is here as well.
If you could just speak directly into the microphone so we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay,
If
sounds
you
good.
could get yourself comfortable.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank the council for opening these public sessions so that we do have input. And I'd like to acknowledge the vast amounts of build-up that the planning department's put together. There's very thorough analysis. And there's nothing in the report that talks about the effective property values that that gas stations, convenience stores, drive-through restaurants have on property values. I know that's not the mandate of planning committee. However, it is something that is very important to landowners. So the second point is there is a noise plan that has been created, but it really only deals with the impact of houses that are adjacent to the property. There is no mention of the impact that it has, that the noise will have on existing residential properties in the region. And like I said, I'm diagonally across from this, and I'm going to be directly affected by that. So I have a great deal of concerns about the noise level, especially now that I hear that the car wash is being moved even closer to my property. Okay. So the third point is the type of impact that this type of business will have on the traffic flow in the region. Colonel Talbot Road is already a very busy and
I'll give you a few seconds extra there.
So, Colonel Talbot Road is already a very busy road during peak hours, and the additional traffic that could come in, the additional interruption to traffic as people turn in and come out of this property certainly is going to have an effect on the traffic flow in the area. Just adding the additional services, the restaurant, the gas bar, it may also increase traffic flow for folks that would not be coming in there otherwise. The report also does not address the noise levels that will occur as cars come to a halt in order to be able to turn into the property, and as they accelerate away after they've had to stop behind somebody that's trying to turn. So probably the most important concern that I've got is the safety concern. The need to turn left into that gas station when you're traveling northbound across two lanes of traffic. It is going to be dangerous. It's going to be dangerous for the folks that are traveling south and an unnecessary hazard. And finally, installing a drive-through restaurant with no seats to sit. People are going to be taking their meals, their coffee, and so forth, and it's going to be encouraging folks to eat while they drive, drink while they drive, and there's been recent legislation changes that prohibits that, so that also needs to be taken into consideration. So certainly it's the driver's responsibility when they're turning left into that property to do that in a safe manner. We all know that that's not going to happen in all situations. It's, I think, important for council to not put something in place that does increase risks to the public and so forth. And so I'd encourage you to decline and to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anyone else that would like to come and speak to this application, please come forward to one of the two microphones that we have, or four. And I see no one else that would like to speak to this, so I would like to go to the committee and close the public participation. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Just before I go to the committee, I want to follow up on, I think there was a question or two through the points that the public had just made. And one of them would be the traffic flow, the concerns of the traffic flow and the safety concerns. I wonder if there's someone here that could speak to it.
Through you, Madam Chair, as part of the site plan, we have asked for a few things to be done here when the site is under construction. And the northbound and the eastbound accesses, we have asked to extend the northbound left-turn lane. That way, traffic going into the site will have a dedicated lane to be stacked or stored, and does not impact the through traffic. As well, we have asked for a westbound left-turn lane into the north axis, and that's the same thing to separate the through traffic from the turning movement. And also, there will be a traffic signal installed at the intersection of Back Road and Colonel Talbot in 2021. So that is another traffic control measure that will be implemented in the area. Not sure if there was any other question.
I guess it related to the safety concerns of moving in this area. And I just want to just go back to the answer of the turning lanes and having that dedicated lane. Are you referring to the one on Colonel Talbot? So there will be a left-hand turn going north into the gas bar, and it won't interfere with the traffic going south? I'm just trying to understand the movement of traffic along Colonel Talbot, that you're referring to the turning lanes.
Yes, so right now it's a two-lane road, and there is a left-hand lane existing approaching the intersection of Colonel Talbot. So that same left-hand lane, we will ask that it's being extended to the south. That way, that left-hand lane will serve the gas bar. Yes.
Thank you. And I want to just follow up with the, I think those are sort of the questions that I've heard from the public. I know the property values, that's really something that we can't address here at planning. It's really not a planning matter, but if staff would like to make a comment.
Madam Chair, with respect to property values, it can be very difficult to quantify as property values are determined by a very wide variety of factors, including things like location, size, condition of dwellings, even the finishes. I would say, though, that these types of uses are contemplated on a residential designation, so they are contemplated in neighborhoods. There are no separation criteria in terms of having them off-site. And there's quite a few examples of the city where these are integrated well into neighborhoods.
Thank you. Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. Question through you to staff, Chair, and that is the timing of the traffic light installation. Is that intended to be consistent with the timing of the completion of the project, or is that something that will come a certain period after, and how much longer will that be relative to the completion of the project if that's the case?
So through you, Madam Chair, so the normally the traffic signals are triggered by warrant analysis, and that is one of the reasons why it's 2021. It's not necessarily tied directly to this project.
Through you, Chair, then could it presumably be quicker if it was deemed that from traffic pattern standpoint that should be quickened in terms of having the project advanced with respect to traffic lights? The project I'm talking about is the traffic light installation.
So this is something I will have to go back and check with the division that deals with the traffic signals, and I can get back to the secretary before council meeting.
Thank you. That's a very good question, because this is an important intersection. I know a year and a half ago, we had asked to start the initial designs on these traffic lights that are needed to move safely between PAC and Colonel Talbot. Not only driving, but also walking and having other options to move around in this area. It's become very, very difficult. And if the committee will allow me, I would like to follow up with another question about the sidewalks along Colonel Talbot from PAC Road going south. I know there was discussions about sidewalks. Again, getting that movement around, having options to do so in this area is very important. And I know from the plan or the conceptual plan that we have, which is not going to be the plan from what I understand, it's still going to be modified, but are there any plans for sidewalks along Colonel Talbot?
Through you, Madam Chair. So Colonel Talbot is scheduled in the DC for two-lane upgrade and urbanization in 2023. and that's when the sidewalks could be installed, at least to my knowledge.
Okay. And I wonder if there's any questions, comments coming from the committee. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on the mayor's and Madam Chair, your question about the traffic signal at that intersection. So this was one of the ones that you, Madam Chair, and I brought forward to Civic Works a few months ago, asking for the detailed design to be done in anticipation of meeting the warrant. I'm wondering where we are with that detailed design for the traffic signal at this intersection.
I will get back to you for council for that. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, a follow-up to that for council. Once the detailed design work is done, or actually, you can probably answer this right away. Once the detailed design work is done, that's sort of like a background necessary step that should speed along the process if the area meets the warrant. Once we have the detailed design done, if the area meets the warrant for a traffic signal, we would be ready to go right away as long as there's budget for it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Any other questions, comments from the committee?
Yes.
Yeah, we are debating right now. I think we have closed it. Councillor Turner.
Just with respect, sorry, I was just trying to pull up the zone and the service station. The application here asks for the special provisions. Special provisions has the components to allow for the car wash to be closer to residential areas. From the recommendation, does it? I guess it would necessitate going back and changing things a little bit. But yeah, what would our options be on that front?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we could have a bit of clarification on the councillor's comments. So basically, it's looking at removing that provision related to the setback for the
car wash.
Yeah, in the report, it talks about the special provision, but will include additional setbacks for the car wash. Anyway, sorry. CC 6 zone to allow for the service station, car wash, and restaurant uses. The recommended amendment will allow for the primary building location as proposed, but will include additional setbacks for the car wash building and any required noise walls to be located further away. So it sounds like that's part of the special provision, is to allow for it to be closer as long as there's mitigation measures taken.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the reduction for the convenience commercial is to allow for the primary building of the convenience store and the restaurant to be located closer to Pack Road and Colonel Talbot, which is a preferred location. The separate set of regulations that apply to the service station zone actually require a further setback. So for instance, the buildings have to be located at least 30 meters away from the open space zone. And then there's noise attenuation barriers also prohibited within that 15 meters of the Mather Stream Corridor, that's the open space. And then there's also setback requirements from the residential zone, which are 15 meters minimum. So the 5 meters that was initially contemplated wasn't supported, and we're proposing instead the 15 meters as a greater setback for that car wash.
Okay, I'm reading the requested amendment 2.2 there. It says, and I read from the wrong line, my apologies. Special provisions were requested to allow for a reduced setback from the car wash. Okay, so they were requested but not granted. With the convenience commercial 6, all the definitions in there say restaurants or convenience stores without a drive-through facility. Is that something that's allowed in the automobile service zoning, or is it something that's a special provision in there as well?
Through you, Madam Chair. So you're correct, the convenience commercial zone does prohibit all types of drive-throughs. However, it is allowed on a site-specific basis to be considered as an exemption. So when that prohibition was introduced, the report at the time continued up saying if they are requested, they're only considered on a site-specific basis. And there are several examples in the convenience commercial where drive-throughs are allowed.
And the last thing I tried to, through you, Madam Chair, find through the Southwest Area Plan, except the PDF and the find and function froze everything up because it's massive, was to try and find drive-through facilities in there and how drive-throughs are contemplated in the Southwest Area secondary plan as opposed to the neighborhood place types associated with the London plan.
Through you, Madam Chair, I actually conducted the same search, and it doesn't have anything specific that it talks to it. What the Southwest Area Plan does in that case is refer back to the 1989 official plan for the consideration of these types of uses for service station and convenience commercial. But also the London plan does have a section for drive-throughs within the neighborhoods place type. They are contemplated where they have which meets that intent.
Thank you, Ms. Wise. So I guess my comments in general, I'm really concerned about the car wash itself. It's very close to residential neighborhoods, both proposed and existing. Wherever it ends up getting situated, the resident, as he stated, we move it closer to Colonel Talbot, it gets closer to his residence. They're very, very loud. And I don't know what the hours of operation, and I mean, through zoning, we don't really approach the concept of hours of operation or restrict them. We just permit them or not. And a lot of car washes can run 24/7. That's the blowers on those things are like high pitched. They're intermittent and random. I can see that as incredibly disruptive. Where it's proposed right now, I see that as completely incompatible with the proposed development. So I'm having a hard time with that part of it, and I'm challenged to actually try and find a way to bring an approval forward that contemplates how that could work, whether it's through an amendment in the site plan or at all. So I'm challenged with that. I guess I don't know what the answer is. I'm inclined to not vote in support of this as a result of that. But if there is a way forward, then I'd be willing to hear that. Or if there was a way of separating out the component of the car wash from it and allowing the rest of the application to go forward.
Just to follow up with Councillor Turner's comment, I'd like to go to staff. Is there an opportunity to separate the car wash from this recommendation, or would we have to refer it back to have that discussion?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's a couple of options. One option could be to approve the recommended zone, but add the provision to prohibit the car wash use. Just add that as an additional special provision, or to refer the matter back for further review and discussion with the applicant.
Mayor Holder.
Thank you. Or the third recommendation could be to accept staff's original recommendation. And I'm very mindful from a business perspective, Chair, that when we look at decisions like this, the applicants come forward and I'll presume they've had negotiations with their various partners from the convenience store to the food restaurant business to the gas station car wash folks. And my sense is that by referring this back, what you're truly doing is you're compelling the applicant to reconsider the whole business decision as to whether to proceed. And that might be a legitimate consideration, but it seems to me that what we're looking at are all parts of a whole here. And when we start to carve out different aspects of it, businesses will make their appropriate decisions. So is is it financially viable for the gas station, service station, to do this without a car wash? Perhaps, perhaps not. I can't respond to that. I don't know those details. Does it provide sufficient traffic flow for all of the various parts of the business model that's been designed here? So once you start to take away different parts of this, then I think that what you're really doing, you're telling the applicant to go back to square one. You're not saying just eliminate one piece or consider taking out one piece and we'll decide from there. I think this puts the whole business model into question. And I think staff have done, I think, a thoughtful job of looking at this. They've looked at it in terms of making adjustments as need be to mitigate impacts. I'll be candid, in today's age, I don't know how much louder or or less loud car washes are, and I'm no expert on this anymore. I don't know if technology has made that any better. I'm not here to tell you because I do not know this. But I look at it from the standpoint of the all parts of a whole here. So I'm going to support the staff recommendation, or else I think the applicant would have to take it literally all back to square one, because I think these are all parts of a whole that, frankly, they've considered when they put this together. I presume I've had no discussion with the applicant, nor would presume to, but any business decision would look at all the factors before they would come forward with a recommendation. And I'd like to think staff's done a pretty thorough job of trying to balance the interests of the community with the business needs and this application. So I will support it as recommended.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That one requires some comment and response. It's not our job to consider the viability of the business venture that's being proposed in part or in whole. Our job is to consider compatibility of land use in this circumstance. And in this circumstance, we see a concern that could be wholly incompatible with residential land use uses in these properties. The referral back allows for that to be further investigated and explored and provide more information to this committee so that those concerns can be alleviated or addressed. They haven't been at this point, and I don't think they get addressed from a delegation at this point. I think they need to be clearly identified with what the noise impacts would be, what the noise radius might be, and how that operation might handle if the car wash wasn't part of it. So I think all of that can be explored, and it's appropriate in a referral back. We recognize the impact that referrals have on the business cycle, but it's also incumbent on the applicant to bring forward that information in the application, identifying concerns. Those have been raised by staff in the discussions with the applicant, so it's quite appropriate for us to have that discussion here. But to say whether a business is viable or not isn't one of those considerations that should be in the land use planning component.
Mr. Mayor Holder.
Well, that certainly deserves a comment. I think we've determined that the compatibility of land use is there. I think when we look at what the staff has recommended, if they've not taken into consideration all from a zoning standpoint, and from a compatibility standpoint, all these various considerations, and what have we got staff here except to make these recommendations? And I'm very sensitive and mindful of the resident that I've heard in terms of concerns expressed, and I respect those. But when it comes back to assessing whether a business is viable, I would agree that is not this council's decision. But I think that when we try to determine if as applications like these are brought forward, and if they have gone through the rigors of various staff recommendations, and not only that, but the appropriate changes made to show flexibility, and then we come back and say, well, from our standpoint, that's fine, but not this. If we don't think that has an impact on the development application of the applicant in this case, then look, none of us are naive, and I'm confident that staff have done an appropriate job of assessing the impacts, and therefore, again, I'm prepared to accept proceeding with this recommendation.
Councillor Squire.
I think I just want to speak on this issue of the viability of a development. I have to say that if people, I guess my position would be if someone's going to stand and say, this development is not financially viable because of something, then they're going to have to show up with numbers. They're going to have to show up with the statements. They're going to have to show us what their financial information is, because I want to see it. And I haven't yet heard the applicant say anything about financial viability. Maybe they will. But I think we're on a slippery slope. If we start, it's always a developer's choice to do a development or not. But if we start venturing down the road of saying, well, this isn't, from a council point of view, this isn't financially viable, then I want to see the statements. I want to see the numbers. And I don't think developers want to start showing in a public setting their numbers on a development. I mean, the competition issues would be great. So I tend to agree with Councillor Turner that we should stick to the planning principles when we're dealing with these things, or we're going to have a new committee, which will be the Planning and Financial Viability Committee. And I don't think that's where we should go. So I'm concerned about that.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm agreeing with a lot of what my colleagues are saying. I note that we have a member from the public here who lives kitty corner to this site, but when I look at the map itself, there are a number of homes directly across Colonel Talbot that arguably will have greater impacts from the sound traveling, the sound from the car wash, the noise directly across Colonel Talbot Road to those homes. So it feels like there seems to be some hesitancy with some members of the committee about the car wash use. When I look at the map of London as well, and just trying to see different car washes in the city, I'm not seeing many, if any, locations this close to residential and to proposed residential as well. Not just, and that's the other thing that we have to take into consideration, Madam Chair, is not just the homes that are there right now. It's the future homes. So the car wash is the one that is sticking with me. I think staff have done a very good job with all the aspects. I know we often say, well, these issues will come up at site plan and we'll deal with these issues at site plan. My worry is that sometimes at site plan, because we've come so far along in the process that, yeah, I have worries with leaving it off until then. I'm going to wait and see what my other colleagues have to say.
Councillor Turner.
In the interest of moving this forward, I will actually move it backwards a little bit and move referral back to staff, requesting that further exploration of the drive-through car wash facility be explored, options, impacts, and mitigations, if possible.
I would like to second that, and I would like to add that if this is, this does pass and is referred back, I think the car wash is the sticking point here, and the noise and the volume, but I would like Colonel Talbot. So if we are going to refer it back, another big part of this is that this conceptual site plan is changed from what we understand to what we're doing here this evening. And I would like to have a better understanding, heard from the applicant that changes are going to be made, but to have a better understanding as to how this is going to look in this community, along with the traffic lights and the sidewalks. So if I could have that added. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. So I understand where my colleagues are coming from with the idea of the referral, and I think potentially something better could come out of more discussion. But I have to say, in terms of the policy framework, I don't think there's any problem with having a restaurant and a gas station and a car wash on this piece of property. It's not to say that the site plan that's in front of us in the report is, I think, the best way of doing that. I do think that it is important when we're building out massive new residential areas, which is what's happening in the Southwest, that people know what is going to be happening on the land. So from my perspective, bringing some clarity to what's happening on this corner, I think would be helpful before the rest of the residential actually gets built out. So people know what they're moving into. And I'd rather see that happen in that order than say this parcel stays vacant for a while, all the residential builds around it, and then something comes in. So, you know, I think we have to look at what is reasonable. I think there's some concern, partly because this is such a area in transition. So, you know, Pack Road right now is only carrying maybe 3,000, 4,000 cars a day. Like, it's not that busy in comparison to Colonel Talbot. Colonel Talbot is pretty busy, and neither of them are nearly as busy as Warncliffe or Wonderland. And that's usually where very few times do people come forward and say, I don't want a gas station, because usually gas stations are on major busy roads like Wonderland and Warncliffe, and there's not a lot of opposition to those locations. I do think an area like this, it's going to be busy, right? And I think that's what we're really trying to anticipate, is that not too long in the future, there's going to be a lot of traffic, a lot more traffic on Colonel Talbot. There's going to be a lot more traffic on Pack Road. And I think having this kind of amenity in this area, probably right now doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, I think it's probably on the borderline. I'm not in the restaurant business or the gas station business, but it's going to. And right now, if in the absence of the gas station, people are driving 3 or 4 kilometers somewhere else to get gas. And it'll probably take a little bit of traffic off of those other roads, and the trips will be shorter if there's one that's closer by that people can go to that's more convenient. So, you know, I think it's reasonable. I do think the site plan's in front of us. I mean, I got my own issues with how close the car wash in particular is to the houses that are to the south, but I think that can be resolved through site plan. I don't think we have to change the zoning. So I'm gonna vote against the referral, although I think if it comes back to us, we could certainly have a different site plan, and maybe that will make people more comfortable with it. And then I think it could be approved then.
Councillor Squire.
I will be also voting against the referral. I think, you know, from a planning point of view, I don't think the car wash is ideal, but I think that, again, can be dealt with at site plan. So I'm not going to support the referral.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a follow-up question to staff then. As we're looking at modifying the site plan, or it's not the site plan, but it's the possible site plan that's in front of us. So cognizant of what Deputy Mayor Helmer has just said, it's better to move in knowing what's already there rather than to have something imposed. So now that causes some concern for me about the possibility of moving the car wash away from future development and closer to already existing residential development. So I'm just wondering how married staff is to the idea of doing that, of moving the car wash closer to Colonel Talbot Road, and if that does happen, how far are we considering moving that car wash location?
Through you, Madam Chair. So this is a complex site. I think everyone can appreciate that very much. There's a lot that we're trying to reconcile here in relation to the restaurant, to the drive-through, to having good pedestrian connections to those uses as well, to having the car wash as well, which is very important. If it were to be referred back, we'd continue our discussions that we'd have, but I just want to caution the committee that it's very likely that this will come before you again as a recommendation. The use is permitted, the intensity as well. Policies do contemplate this, so we will have further discussion, but from a application of policy perspective, there might be limited options coming forward. We could explore the mitigation measures and provide a bit more information, but it may be what you see here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if the referral doesn't pass tonight, what about the idea of an H5 to allow further conversation about, because the issues around this, as they often are, tend to be around site plan. So I just want staff's thoughts on the idea of a public site plan.
We'll of course take any, through Madam Chair, we'll of course take any direction from committee. The public site plan though would be communicating essentially the information that I just mentioned to you there, the discussions that we've had through the site plan process. I'm not sure how much more additional information could be provided through that, especially for the other site plan matters except for that, but we will take of course any direction from committee and council.
Ms. Wise?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to quickly point out the two interfaces that we are trying to most sensitively design for are the Mather Stream, that's the open space corridor, and the future residential. And the Colonel Talbot Road option was desirable because it already represents a stationary source of noise that we protect against through future development, through things like noise walls and building orientation. So that's why the intent was to have the car wash oriented to Colonel Talbot because it already has that sense of noise and we can already mitigate it from future development across the street.
Councillor Turner?
I recognize, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the comments here. The only thing I'm trying to accomplish here is, I think there's probably information we could gather that that surrounds. As said, we don't know how much noise a contemporary car wash makes, but I'd imagine the manufacturers do, and would be able to provide that information. Say it provides this many decibels at this range and this. Referral back is because that information for me to make a decision on whether this is a to just say whether we approve the car wash leaves it to site plan and the car wash is approved. If information comes for back that that there aren't many mitigating options and that the noise, the sound produced by that car wash is significant, we're left with no options because we've approved it and the zoning allows it. I also recognize what Mr. Yeoman's saying here is that there's not a lot of wiggle room in there in terms of the policy components. I think there's special provisioning on other things, and I'm glad to hear that that we didn't move forward with the special provisions on the car wash itself, that they were requested but not recommended. This was challenging, and so I'm trying to find the best way forward, the one that provides the most opportunity for the applicant to have a successful resolution, to include all the options that they wish to see within the application, rather than me just saying, I don't like it because of this car wash, and vote against it. That's kind of the process in this, because it allows for that. A public site plan meeting might cause us some challenges because we had one community member come to speak today, which was great, but public site plan usually deals with significantly contentious community issues. And I think we've identified what those issues are. They're pretty clear, and that we would want to be able to address those through site plan. I think the question the councillor is asking is, do we get another kick at the can as a council at the site plan component itself? And typically we don't at this point. I mean, we can make recommendations to the site plan approval authority. I think that might be an option for us to do here and add that if we wanted to, if the motion of referral back was to fail, an alternative to that would be to say that these conditions be considered in the approval of the site plan. Such as noise mitigation to all neighboring properties, both those on the other side of Colonel Talbot and the ones in proposed future development, and having that right balance. And I recognize the challenge that Ms. Wise and Mr. Yeoman have in working with the applicant to make sure that all the components of that site are cited appropriately. I'm not against the application in general. I just want to make sure that we've addressed concerns for property owners, as Councillor Deputy Mayor Helmers noted. It's hard for residents to go in fully knowing what a future development opportunity is within any area of the city. And often we change zoning and we change land uses, and that's when we hear conflicts. So anyway, I'm looking for a way forward with this, and that's why I came forward with the referral. I'll still support that. Should that fail, I would like to see some commentary added to the site plan recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Turner, and if the committee would allow me, I'd like to just make a few comments. This is in my ward, and I am seconding the referral back. I am not against this recommendation, the gas bar, the convenience store. Those things are something that our policies support. It's the car wash, the noise, how it fits in this area. I cannot stress enough all the things that are going on in this area. There's a lot of challenges as we move around and as we develop. I think the community needs to understand how we're going to move forward with development, supporting development for sure, supporting this recommendation, but having a better understanding how this is going to look in the community is something that I know the community would want to know. And I'm seconding this recommendation to have it, the referral, to have it go back. Given the challenges that we have with even moving at this intersection, even crossing the street, and then we are really not understanding what is going to be planned here and if that can be allowed. I know a policy supported, but having a better understanding what is proposed, I think the referral will give us that. I hear what Mr. Yeoman says. He'll probably be coming back, but we need to have a better understanding how it's going to look in this intersection. So with that, I see no further comments, and is the referral up?
Yes.
I'd just like to ask the committee, do you see the referral on the screen? No. Okay. We're working on it. Okay, if you hit the marker, it will, where you vote, it should have the information there.
Closing the vote, the motion fails on a tie vote 3-3.
So the motion lost, so there is an opportunity for another motion to come forward. Deputy Mayor Helmer?
I'll move the staff recommendation, and I think it's been clear in the discussion, but some advice to the site plan approval authority around the distance from the south boundary in particular, I think needs to be included in that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
So moving on to our next public participation meeting, I would like to go to I need a motion to open up the public participation meeting. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
This is a public participation meeting to revise the wording of the existing H18 holding provisions regarding the archaeological assessment. I'd like to go to the public. If there is public here that would like to speak to it, that's great. I wonder if the committee would like to have a staff presentation. I see none. I would therefore like to go to the public. Please come forward, Mr. Wallace, and
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my counselor. Thank you very much for having us here tonight. Welcome back, council, back from your summer. I know you still worked in the summer. I know you still worked in the summer, but welcome back to committee. I just have a couple brief points. It's Mike Wallace. I'm with the London Development Institute. And I'm here to speak to the wording changes to H18. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Barrett for his efforts in getting me the information earlier than it wasn't available, and he got it for me, and I really appreciate that effort. We are fine with the changes to, I know the report really highlights one word change and new exterior work being done, and before it was just construction, so it's new exterior construction. We're certainly supportive of that. There are other wording changes in the H, and it's an important holding provision to my industry. And I am, be frank with you, still waiting for some response from some of my members on that. So if there are any additional comments, you'll see them before council from me. What highlighted for me is not the H itself, but the process that this is a major policy issue, the H18 for for our development community, and dealing with this stuff during the summer is somewhat of a difficulty. So my recommendation is that for any future policy stuff that deals with the development industry, that if at all possible, that it be dealt with in the fall, the winter, or the spring, or just before summer would be much more appreciated, because as you know, getting folks to respond during vacations can be somewhat of a challenge. And so we are all just getting back at it, to be perfectly frank with you. And so that would be my comment on not just on the H, but on future policy issues that you're looking for feedback from the development industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak to this application? Please come forward. I see none. I would like to go to the committee to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Subcommittee, this is to revise the language in the existing H18 holding provision to clarify the activities on the site, and in particular that word that's included in Appendix A to add that new exterior construction. And I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Cassidy to accept the changes, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I wonder if we're moving on to 3.8 now, and I'd like to ask the committee if they would like to take a 15-minute break. It is 6:15. It's up to the committee, or do we just move forward? And get a sense moving forward is the way to go. So I would like to have a motion then to open the public participation meeting. Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And noticed there's a number of people here in the gallery, so I would like to go to the committee to see if you would like a presentation from staff. I see nods, so I would like to go to Ms. Bisato. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject lands are municipally known as 475 and 480 Edge Valley Road and are located on the north side of Kaleli Road and east of Highbury Avenue. These sites are part of a larger plan of subdivision, which was recently registered in December of 2018, known as the Edge Valley subdivision. At 475 Edge Valley Road, the proposed development includes 3 low-rise apartment buildings ranging in height from 4 to 6 stories with a total of 147 units. The applicant has requested a residential R8 special provision bonus zone for this site to allow for the increase in 5- and 6-story buildings up to 100 units per hectare in exchange for affordable housing. The applicant has agreed to provide 4 affordable barrier-free housing units at 85% of average market rent for a 15-year period. At 480 Edge Valley Road, the proposed development includes 2 low-rise apartment buildings, both 4 stories in height, with a total of 78 units. The applicant has requested a residential R8 special provision zone to permit the 4-story buildings at a density of 75 units per hectare. Both sites have requested special provisions for minimum and maximum front, rear, interior, and exterior side yard setbacks. From a policy context, the provincial policy statement supports efficient and resilient development patterns through a range of uses and appropriate infill and intensification within settlement areas. As per the London Plan, the subject site is located within the neighborhood's place type along a civic boulevard, a neighborhood connector, and a neighborhood street. The neighborhood's place type allows for a wide range of residential uses, including low-rise apartments up to 4 stories, with the allowance for bonusing up to 6 stories on a civic boulevard and neighborhood connector. The subject site is designated multifamily medium-density residential within the 89 official plan, which permits multiple unit residential developments. Normally, height limitations will not exceed 4 stories and density will not exceed 75 units per hectare. However, bonusing may permit height and density beyond these limits. Issues raised through circulation were categorized into 3 main areas. Comments on the building and site design include the amount of paved surface and parking on site, stormwater and grading issues, increased open space and landscaping, use of underground parking, and increased buffering and setbacks adjacent to existing development. The applicant has indicated they will provide additional landscaping and more robust fencing along the western property edge of 480 Edge Valley. A slight reconfiguration of the parking area to add a drive aisle and plantings adjacent to the residence will help to lessen any possible impacts on adjacent neighbors. The development of the site will also ensure appropriate stormwater servicing is installed. The applicant has provided parking as per the bylaw, with additional visitor parking above and beyond what is normally permitted or required. Underground parking is not a requirement for this type of development. Residents raised concerns related to possible impacts that include noise, lighting, privacy, safety, and security. The applicant has implemented a number of crime prevention through environmental design principles, including eyes on the street to increase security. The applicant has indicated that lighting will be provided to illuminate the development, but will be situated so as not to impact the adjacent developments. Fencing will be incorporated to help alleviate any privacy and security concerns. Residents also raised compatibility and property value implications and impacts from student or affordable housing. The subject lands and official plan policy permit and contemplate this housing form and density as compatible residential land uses, and adds to the range and choice of housing options within the area. This development is not located in the near campus neighborhoods. Affordable housing is a very small component of the development, and no impacts are anticipated from this. Concerns were raised regarding high traffic volume in the area and the effect this development will have on the neighborhood. Edge Valley Road is a neighborhood connector which contemplates this level of traffic, as does Kaleli Road. Benjamin Drive in the adjacent subdivision is a temporary street and will therefore be closed, and all traffic will access via Edge Valley. This will eliminate any cut-through traffic into the surrounding streets and existing single detached neighborhood. Many residents spoke of traffic concerns off-site, such as on Webster Street, which is external to this development, speed limits on Highbury Avenue, and the need for more stoplights on Highbury Avenue. Transportation Division has indicated that Highbury and Edge Valley are scheduled for additional traffic counts, which may change the requirements for a traffic signal in the future. No reduction in speed limits is anticipated for Highbury Avenue, but it is possible as development occurs that these speed limits will be reassessed. Overall, staff are recommending the requested amendment to allow for low-rise apartment buildings with a site-specific bonus zone. In consultation with the applicant and the Housing Development Corporation, the recommended bonus zone requires the applicant to enter into an agreement to provide for 4 affordable housing, barrier-free housing units at a rate of 85% of average market rent for a duration of 15 years. Overall, the proposed use contributes to the range and mix of housing options in the area and provides an efficient development and use of land. The recommended zoning bylaw amendment provides appropriate regulations to control the use and ensure a well-designed development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions from staff? I see none. I'd like to go to the applicant, if the applicant is here. Please come forward, your name, address, if you wish. And you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, ooh. Through the chair, Carrie O'Brien, on behalf of the applicant, Drulo Holdings, we'd like to just commend staff on their willingness to let us move forward with this site plan concurrent to the zoning bylaw amendment. It really helped us address residents' concerns in real time, and we were able to make a number of concessions for the adjacent residents. And I think that we've appropriately addressed that. So, and that's the extent of it.
Thank you. Any technical questions of the applicant? I see none. I'd like to go to the gallery, and I'll start on my right side here, just moving along. If you'd like to speak to this application, just come forward to the microphones, just stating your name and address if you wish, and you have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Hi, so Lydia, 1530 Benjamin.
If you could just speak right into that mic, just lift it up a little bit.
Okay.
Great.
There we go. Okay, Lydia, 1530 Benjamin Drive. So we are the property that you can see in the site there that backs right onto the 480 plan that has the line of trees. The parking lot. So that parking lot will be in our backyard, basically. So we have met with Drulo. Carrie has been kind enough to come to our home and they have been actually quite nice to work with. And in the sense where they did move the one building that you see on an angle so that it's not directly in our backyard. And they also changed the parking lot around for us, which we really appreciated because originally those parking spaces were going to be where those trees are. What we asked is that we could have we planted our own row of trees to help with some buffering of noise and what have you. And we asked and columnar oak, we chose spruce. We just would like to make sure that they are, when planted, already quite large, just to help with some of the buffering and what have you. The concern for us was having the cars parked against our fence line, but they just a little stronger, instead of a regular type of fence board, perhaps a stronger fence board. Right now, that whole area, the trees are cleared. All we have is a chain link fence. That area is completely open, and we have people who are back there all the time that are walking the area, and they come close to our property line, and we're worried of people jumping the fence. So we requested that the fence be built this year as soon as possible, so they not jump our fence. It's only a 4-foot chain link. That used to be forest back there. So our main concern is mainly just a proper beefed up fence, which we don't think would be a great expense to a development company that large. And to prevent people from coming through, and of course, it's a non-climbable fence. So that is really our only concern is they have mentioned that they only want to do a 4x4 fence still, but we would request that it's a much beefier, stronger 6x6 non-climbable fence. We're not asking for the brick wall. We're just asking for a beefier, non-climbable fence. We are not sure if it can be higher than the 1.8 meters or 6 feet, but that is our main concern. Otherwise, everything has been great, and Carrie's been wonderful to work with, and they've made a lot of changes, and we don't really have any concerns other than fence and trees size. They would try and get that fence built this fall for us. So.
Thank you. I'm just going to go along the center and towards my left. If there's anyone here that would like to speak to this application, please come forward. I see none. I'll go to the committee then and ask if there's a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I'd like to go to the committee. Any questions, comments? I notice the councillor of the ward, Councillor Sally, is here. If you would like to go first, please do.
Thank you, committee, and thanks for recognizing me. Just for the members of the public who don't know, I'm not on this committee, so I don't get a vote here today, but I do at council. I do want to thank the members of the public who showed up, as well as the people who submitted via email and attended this site, the applicant's community meeting, and want to thank the applicant for working with the community, because I know there was a lot of concerns, and they did a lot of great work in between now and then, and I guess that shows the importance of having those meetings. Nancy could probably attest to that, because that's why there's not 100 people here versus how many people we have here today. I do share some of this, the concerns with the resident that just last spoke about the fence, and I know this because I visited the site in the past and also recently in the summer, and you know, the parking lot was, and I guess the building still does back right up into some people's backyards. And if someone's having a barbecue or anything like that, it really leaves them with just a little bit of space, and a 4x4 really isn't that high. So I guess my question to staff is, have we ever, you know, contemplated this in the past? I know back in 2015, myself and Councillor Helmer were talking about a fence in Fanshawe Ridge that was built by Sifton. And at the time, that didn't go through, where we were asking for that to be contemplated. And now when I go back to the neighborhood and I hear from the residents, and the impact of not having the proper fence that they wanted at the time has been an ongoing issue for them. And it just came down to a simple fence. So I just, through the chair, want to ask that question.
So the question is about the fencing, going to a 6x6. I would assume that was the request from the resident, but also the timing of the fence too, if you can make a comment.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. So a couple of things that I could talk about from a site plan perspective. Firstly, with the fence, We don't actually specify the size of the post that goes into the ground, whether it be 4x4, 6x6. What we do request through the design manual and the site plan control bylaw is the height, and that's at 6 feet or 1.8 meters in height, and it'd be a tight board on board fence. So those are the parameters that we're provided with in the site plan design manual, and that's what we see typically through our site plan processes and approval recommendations to the approval authority. So that's fencing, and that's the box that we live in, so to speak, with fencing. I'll take this opportunity as well to talk a bit about trees, because that was brought up as well. The manual itself also does talk about the size and caliper of trees that are to be.
Sorry, could you speak up just
Sorry,
a little bit
there we go.
louder?
Normally I'm pretty
So-
loud. I try to step back a little bit, so.
Would you mind just starting, speaking about the fencing?
Certainly, I can do that again now.
And then going into the trees, just to make sure we're covering everything. Thank you.
Thanks. So just to go back, the fence posts, we do not regulate through the site plan control bylaw. So 4x4, 6x6, we don't necessarily specify. It's left to the developer of the day. What we do specify in our manual for site plan is the height, which is 1.8 meters or 6 feet, and it has to be a tight board on board fence. So those are the parameters that we have for fencing. As I mentioned, and it wasn't maybe clearly heard, was that I was also going to just take a quick second to talk about planting materials as well, because that was a question that was brought up, specifically with respect to tree sizes. So deciduous trees in the site plan design manual have a specific size for plantings being about 2.5 inches in diameter or 60 millimeters. And then coniferous trees are 2 meters tall and at 6.5 feet. So those are the sizes that we specify from, and I won't get into too much of the landscape and arborist world, because that's not an area that I specialize in, but what we understand in site plan is that once you start to go beyond those sizes, the efficacy or the ability for those trees to survive long-term starts to deteriorate and go down. So that's why we have that size setting in our bylaw. That's the area that has been provided to us when this bylaw was written that provides the best opportunity for these trees to survive. So anything taller than that, it may not be able to be accommodated within the environment that it's planted in. So again, those are the two areas that I heard of being brought up through the questions, and that's where we can provide assistance. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Sully, I'll go back to you. Or would you like to listen to the committee first?
I'll listen to the committee for a minute.
For sure. Any comments, questions from the committee? If the committee will allow me, I do have a question about the affordable housing units. There's 4 of them that are proposed. It's always good to see affordable housing coming forward. These units are at 85%. I have 2 questions. I guess, first of all, do we know if these units are going to be 1 or 2 or 3 bedrooms? But my main question, I think, is around how we do these these applications with units coming in, and trying to understand if we have policies or requirements. I would assume we're going to see a lot more of this coming forward. So when we have buildings coming forward and they've got 2 units or 4 units or 8 units, how do we know, or do we know within our policies how that's all calculated, and how do we come up with that number?
Through you, Madam Chair, while Ms. Posado is looking for the information on the units, I think I can handle the number 2 question that you had. The question's a very good one. The short answer is that we don't actually have strong criteria related to bonusing matters. That's something we were working to advance before Bill 108, and with the changes that have been made in the bonusing regime that's been stripped back, which will be gone basically in about a year and a half at the most. We put those plans on hold. So as we go forward, what we're doing is as we've been doing to date, doing our best to negotiate what we believe are reasonable facility service and matters that are related to the additional height and density that are provided. It's not necessarily always a 1-for-1, but we try to get something that we think is a good fit and it's in the public interest that we can recommend to you.
Thank you for that clarification. I think it's really important at the committee that we kind of understand. I know Bill 108 is still to be determined, and it kind of changes how we go forward with our policies, and just waiting to figure that all out. So thank you. And Ms. Posada.
Just to, through you, Madam Chair, just to add to Mr. Yeoman's comments, generally, in this particular application, the affordable housing units, 4 of them are related to the lift or the number of additional units. At 75 units per hectare, there would have been 110 units roughly that would have been permitted on that site. With the 100 units per hectare with the additional bonus consideration, that's 147 units permitted. The uplift, as it's known as, is 37 units. So 4 units, therefore, of 37 units is about 10.8%. So you get about 10.8% of those units as affordable housing in the uplift. Your first question, though, with respect to the types of units, there is proposed a total of 3 one-bedroom units and 1 two-bedroom unit. As well, from what I understand, Drulo is working with directly with a service care provider, I believe, CNIB. So they have a direct relationship with that, so these will also be barrier-free units as well.
Thank you. Committee, any comments, questions? Councillor Cassidy?
Just going back to that fence issue, I'm wondering what our current bylaw says for a maximum allowed height for a fence.
So there's a bit of differentiation between the fence bylaw and the site plan control bylaw. The fence bylaw goes to a maximum of 7 feet, whereas the site plan control bylaw goes to a maximum of 6 feet. The fence bylaw does defer, though, to the site plan control bylaw. So if we were to, there's the latitude in the site plan control bylaw to go a little bit more in excess of what the current standards are based on the approval authority's view of whether it's meeting the intent. So 7 would probably be the maximum to the short end of it.
Thank you. Councillor Sally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to, if it's allowed through you, I just wanted to know if the applicant was able to kind of speak on the rationale behind the 4x4 versus the 6x6, and kind of just touch on the trees in the 1 row versus the 2 row, I guess. Just curious about that.
Since you asked, I wonder if I could go to the applicant and asking the question about the fencing, the height, and the rows of trees to compare to 1.
So we've been speaking with the applicants as as neighbors, as Lydia mentioned. Our standard on all of our developments is to go with a 4x4 fence. For maintenance purposes, we like to keep that as one standard. The fence will be solely located on Drulo's property, so any concerns with future maintenance of the fence not being a 6x6 post will fully be borne by Drulo. And I've provided contacts to them that they can reach out to us if there is any concerns in the future. And then with regard to the trees, we had originally had deciduous trees there, and we were hoping to sort of stagger some coniferous species in between. There unfortunately just isn't enough space. So as a compromise, we had came back with a fully coniferous blue spruce to provide a little bit more landscape screening for the neighbors there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And with that, I'd like to go to the committee to see if there's any other questions, comments. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the public who came out. And through you, Madam Chair, also thanks to the applicant. Infill projects are often contentious. They happen a lot in my ward. But it's really good to see the developer reach out directly to members of the public. When you see specific individual itemized issues being addressed in a collaborative way, we see that the end result is much better for everybody. So thank you as well, through you, Madam Chair, for working openly with the director and rather than just, or not the director, the applicant, rather than just saying no. So I appreciate that as well. It doesn't happen often enough. And so when I see it happen, I'm actually at a loss for words, and I'm very appreciative of the work that's gone on to address very specific problems. I like the idea that the fence will be on Drullo's property, and therefore Drullo will maintain that piece of infrastructure. So if there are problems, as a property manager, I don't their properties and they keep them up. So that's good for the neighboring properties, and that the tree planting is with the blue spruce, that sounds very good to me as well. So I'm supportive of the staff recommendation, and would love to see more of these kinds of applications come forward.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I'll go to Councillor Sally to just wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you, members of the public. Councillor Cassidy is correct. Every planning meeting that I've gone to, particularly for our ward, usually isn't this collaborative, so it's really good to see that the residents were able to work with the applicant and get us to almost the perfect situation. But I guess, you know, that being said, I don't have a vote or an opportunity to kind of weigh in further at this point, but I'll continue to contact, and if you guys have any feedback as we go from now, in between now and the council date, which is next week, then I'll be able to, you know, at that time, reach out to the applicant, talk to my colleagues, and kind of go from there. But hearing from staff about, you know, what our restrictions are and what we can do as far as the height, you know, the 6 feet is kind of within the site plan versus, you know, we can't really kind of get into the post itself particular within what we can do as a council here. But it seems to be that the applicant is willing and hopefully wants to continue to listen, but it is a positive that it is on their property. I think that will provide that level of maintenance, because that was my concern in some projects where if it falls down from a bad storm, then it's kind of just left. And sometimes the cost to fix is thrown back onto the residents. But I guess in this situation, it's kind of mitigated that concern. But I'll continue to hear from you all, and if there's anything I can do from now till council, I'll do that and work with the applicant and work with council and move us forward. But really, thank you for making Ward 3 look good today, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sally, and I guess I'll go to the committee. I am looking for a motion here. Deputy Mayor.
Seen in terms of the affordability. So I know that's always a tricky balance. I think we need to see more of that on these kind of planning applications. It's great.
And if I can have a seconder in Councillor Turner. Any further comments from the committee? I see none. I'd just like to make a comment from the chair. I want to thank the public for coming out and the work that you have done with the applicant as well as with the councillor, and it's really good to see that. It's good to see affordable housing units come forward as well, and very supportive of this recommendation going forward. Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Committee, we are next on to number 4, items for direction. It is 6:45. A suggestion could be that we can continue with the items for direction, the deferral. We can then break for supper and then go into camera as well and adjourn from there. I'm up to suggestions from the committee, how you would like to proceed. We'll keep going, and if everyone is still present, the next item for direction is 4.1. This is the 7th report of the Advisory Committee on the Environment. Councillor Turner.
Quick questions for you to the clerks. I'd imagine, I seem to recall ACE formerly receiving agendas, or maybe it was just EPAC receiving the agendas of the other committees. It was a long time ago. So is any concerns or issues with the request that's being put forward by EPAC in this circumstance?
With ACE.
Through you, Madam Chair, my only concern would be what they're going to do with that information. I would hate to see the advisory committees being in cross debate. If it's being received just for their information, I have no concerns with that.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I seem to recall that it was just to get a sense of coordination of activities. Some files cross between the advisory committees or are concurrently on advisory committees' agendas, so it's helpful for them to see that. So I see it as a reasonable request. I'd make the motion to accept and make the direction as requested by the committee.
That is a motion, second by Councillor Cassidy.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And moving on to 4.2, this is the report from Latch. I'm looking for a motion to receive that. Councillor Cassidy? Yes, just one moment.
I think in here that the following actions be taken with respect to the report. So that would be the motion that's put forward. Just if I might.
Yes, Councillor Turner, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with respect to the number 2.3, the council be advised of the potential bid to the Ontario Heritage Conference. I'd imagine that's independent of the city, or is there any action required of the city? This sounds like it's just advising us that they're going forward and doing so. And I'm not sure. It looks okay as I'm reading through it. It sounds like Mr. Kinghorn is making the bid himself. That Latch supports that, and that Latch is advising us that that's what's going forward. But there's no action required on the city's part. Just wanted to clarify that, though, for sure.
If we can get clarification on that, Mr. Barrett?
Through the chair, yes, that's my understanding. In fact, this is an independent thing, and Latch is just concurring with the request to bring the conference to London.
Then I'll make the motions as placed here.
Thank you, and it has been seconded as well. Councillor Cassidy, second.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And with that, we'll move on to deferred matters, additional business. I see none. I will ask for a recess then or should we adjourn? No. Just one moment. So I'll ask for a motion to go in closed session. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Squire.